All right, hi everybody. It's about time to get started. Welcome to tonight's webinar hosted by GBBO. My name is Kayla Henry and I am part of our outreach team. Most of you attending already know Great Basin Bird Observatory, but for anybody new, GBBO is a nonprofit based in Reno, Nevada. We are dedicated to conserving birds and their habitats in the Great Basin and beyond. We do this through research, partnerships, and education. Tonight, we will hear from GBBO's outreach biologist, Ned Bohman, about the Nevada Birdathon, and we will close the presentation with a fun bird quiz, so stay tuned. Without further ado, I'll pass things along to Ned.
All right, thanks, Kayla. Thanks for the introduction. I'm really excited to talk to you guys tonight. It's going to be a really fun program, and I'm really excited to spread the word about the Birdathon. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Okay, Birdathon is a competitive fundraiser, competitive bird watching fundraiser, kind of like a walkathon dating back to the 70s. And we can thank Bird Studies Canada for the concept. And then shortly thereafter, Point Reyes did the first one in the US. And so it's like I said, a fundraiser like a walkathon where you collect pledges per species seen in this case. And it's a 24-hour period in which you go out and try to see as many species as you can. You do this as a team or as an individual, and there are a lot of variations depending on who is organizing the event. We've created a big day category and a backyard category. And we are awarding winners in each category with prizes for most species seen and most funds raised. A lot of Birdathons are community affairs, so they really engage the whole community and get sponsors from other local businesses and really get everyone. One of the cool things about it is that it really gets everyone together and involved. It can do some cool collaborative funding and has some really great potential to leverage conservation dollars by working together. And so that URL there, Kayla will paste into the chat, but that's our webpage that has all of this info written out on it. And so you can't really talk about Birdathons without talking about big days, which are sort of a natural progression of the birding culture. It's got a long history in birding, at least to the 30s and 40s, where Charles Erner and Ludlow Grisham in the New York City and New Jersey area started doing these things during May to see how many warblers they could catch or how many warblers they could see rather in a single day in this sort of spread. But bird watching being a listing hobby can sort of naturally lead to that competitive fun, and it's all well and good when it is just fun. It's gotten to the point now where there is an official set of rules governing these affairs, moderated by the American Birding Association, the ABA, and they actually keep track of the records and they publish winning big days. So the current world record is 431 species, and the current North American record is 294. And that's in Texas in 2013, and that was on one of the eBird Global Big Days. And that record was set by the eBird Cornell team, the Sapsuckers. So I think they also had the previous record, which was also set in Texas, and the record before that was also set in Texas. And just a note on those numbers, 294 species is well over half of the species on Nevada's state checklist. So Texas is where you go to set big day records. But these are people birding from midnight to midnight, 24 full hours of birding like maniacs, racing between spots to see how many species you could see. Having participated in a few myself, I can attest to the craziness and manicness. It is certainly not your everyday birding pace, and definitely not the style of birding that I want to do all the time. But every once in a while, it's good fun to see what you can do. And so in Nevada, it's a fun place to do a big day. I suppose every state has its unique features that make it a fun place to do a big day. But our current record is 171, and that was set in 2016 by Paul Hurtado, Rob Lowry, Brian Steger, and David Kozlowski. And I don't know the latter two, but I know Paul and Rob very well. So kudos to you guys, because that's far better than I've been able to do on any Nevada attempt. That URL there is Paul's blog post about the day. It's a pretty fun read and gives you a taste of what these manic affairs are really like. And so they beat in 2016, the record they beat was 162 from Larry Neal, Graham Chisholm, Keith Geluso, and Bob Flores in 1997. And that was actually my personal Nevada Big Day record. But my personal Nevada Big Day does not adhere to the ABA rules. We catered to Nevada, and we started at 4 p.m., ended at 4 p.m. We had to adapt based on the lay of the land. So because Nevada has so much habitat, so many options, it's such a big area to cover, we felt it would be fun to try to do a Mojave to Great Basin big day and try to maximize our count that way. And while we did pretty well, it was a lot of work, a lot of driving. Got us to a lot of really cool spots, all the way from Great Basin National Park through the Clover Mountains, pretty much every water source from there to Lake Mead. And that's where it finished up. So 162 was the best we could manage, though. And to put some of those numbers in perspective, our Nevada state checklist is currently at 493. But I'm excited with all these Birdathon teams out there this spring to chase up some new state birds. So what gave me the idea was definitely other states and seeing what they're doing with their Birdathons. So they're a widely used fundraiser, which, you know, it's a pretty logical fundraising idea for birders. But some well-established ones do really well. I mean, Portland, Oregon, and Massachusetts Audubon both raised over $250,000 last year. Others that are not so large but are fast growing. So the Santa Clara Valley in California raised $39,000 in 2019, and 2 years later, $65,000. So a pretty remarkable increase in just a couple of years. So these things are popular and catching on. And if you give it a try, you'll probably see why. So the Birdathon is totally a Nevada tradition. We did not start it at GBBO. We just reinvigorated it. That URL there is that link is a trip report of Larry Neal's 1996 Birdathon, where they found 150 species. So that's a pretty fun read. 1996, so you can appreciate a little flavor from the 90s. Nevada birding in the 90s in there. I couldn't find a whole lot of other info on previous Nevada Birdathons. So when we revitalized it a few years ago, we were very excited. And of course, all of the best laid plans, right? We made these plans in the end of 2019, and then welcome in 2020. So we struggled in the beginning. We adapted. We had 9 teams registered in 2020 and 17 in 2021. So we're pretty pleased with that increase in participation. We raised just under $2,000 in 2020 and a bit over $2,000 last year for Pinyon J Conservation. Again, we're very pleased with that trend in increasing. Hopefully that continues this year. We had teams from both Northern and Southern Nevada in both years. Most of our winners last year were from Southern Nevada, which is interesting given the big day records are both set in Northern Nevada. Not really sure what gives there. As I mentioned, previous Birdathon winners, Beasts of Burden in 2021, Desert Shore Birds in 2020. 157 species is no small day, and neither is 98. Those are both very respectable birding days in Nevada. having done a few myself. I know what it's like. I know the struggle. And in both years, the Castaways raised the most funds, so that was good for them. Congrats, guys. We had some awesome prizes donated by some local partners. We have a similar thing going on this year. We've been working and networking with a lot of local businesses to put together some fun prizes for our winners. So we're hoping for some good stuff this year. And that photo there is the award ceremony we did at Davis Creek Park after the event last year. So you can see it was a pretty intimate affair, but this year's is looking to be a little bigger. But before I talk about what we've got going on this year, where does the money go? So it's a collaborative fundraiser. We're raising We are raising money for Pinyon J Conservation. Since the early 2000s, GBBO has been involved with Pinyon J research and monitoring. They've seen an 80% decline in their global population since the 70s. The reasons for this are still not clear. It has to do with habitat, but there are so many variables interacting in such a complicated way and so many different landscape management priorities being balanced that it's a very tricky situation to untangle. So we're very interested in figuring out just what's going on here. And one of the stepping blocks really has been the difficulty to study these birds. They're nomadic, they cover big distances, they don't lend themselves well to standardized survey protocols. So the Partners in Flight formed a working group, and they developed a region-wide survey protocol that has sort of standardized things a bit. In 2020, we launched our community science project, which is another effort to increase our knowledge here, where we have actual volunteers going out and collecting data and submitting to us. And just recently, we've been improving this with the community science hub that we've just developed. It's an Esri product, and it's a really, really cool conservation database where you can log on and you can see the data being collected. There's a map view of where the data is being collected, and it's a huge amalgamation of resources and all things Pinyon J. So this is really taken off in huge part to a partnership with Lahontan Audubon and Audubon Southwest. And so it's really exciting to see these things developing and taking off. And as it's so new, it's still developing, still changing. So we're all very excited to see what we can do with this and with some more with some funds brought in by the Birdathon. And so what's happening this year? So we have a few events going on during the Birdathon, which I probably didn't mention yet. The Birdathon is going from May 1st through May 15th this year. And so there's a few events during that time window. Spring Wings is an old birding festival that used to happen out in the Lahontan Valley in Fallon, Carson Lake, Stillwater area. And in the recent years, it has seen sort of a lull. And so this year, Lahontan Audubon is bringing it back with help from some other partners, and we are proud to be helping with that. So on April 30th and May 1st, this will be happening. And this year it's going to be basically a bunch of self-guided field trips where we're going to have experts posted up throughout the valley, and you guide yourself around to the experts, or as you please, to see what you see. But this will be coordinated. There'll be some networking about who's seeing what where. It'll be a fun time out there and a great time of year to bird the Lahontan Valley wetlands. And so that is opening day of the Birdathon, and the 30th is the day before the Birdathon. So if you're there on the 30th, unfortunately that can't count towards your Birdathon. But if you go on May 1st, you can totally Birdathon. And we've got a field trip at the McCarran Ranch with Ben Sonnenberg on May 7th. He did a field trip last year for us for the Birdathon, and it was very well received. So I'm pretty excited to have him doing that for us again. I mentioned before the eBird Global Big Day. This year is May 14th. So if you decide to Birdathon on the 14th, you can contribute to multiple citizen science big day efforts at once. And we are actively trying to organize more trips in the Las Vegas area and in the Northern Nevada area. So stay tuned as we announce those. And if you or anyone you know would like to lead a field trip for the Birdathon, definitely get in touch with us. We would love to encourage that in any way we can. And then after the Birdathon, we'll do sort of a roundup, do an awards ceremony. We'll do one in Northern Nevada and in Southern Nevada. I'm pretty excited for the one in Northern Nevada this year because it's going to be coupled with the release of the Flight of the Pinyon J IPA, which Pigeon Head has partnered up with us to produce. And so this is going to be a fun collaborative conservation dollar raising beer. And on June 10th at Pigeon Head Brewery in Reno, we are going to release that and announce the winners of the Birdathon. So if you're in Reno on June 10th, come on down and say hi to us. And I'm also hoping that teams this year will send in some photos and stories, maybe a little blurb of how their day went, because I love hearing about other big days, and I think all of their participants would too. So it could be fun to put together a Birdathon flyer, a Birdathon newsletter, and send it around to participants afterwards, so we all share some stories and memories of the Birdathon, because as anyone who's done a big day before knows, these are memorable affairs. Whenever you're staying up for 24 hours, it's inevitable, I suppose. So the field trips that I was talking about are primarily to encourage participation from folks who may be daunted by the prospect of preparing their own big day and setting off for that. It can certainly be a daunting affair, especially with some of these numbers I've been tossing around, which, a big day can be as much or as little as you make it. But so these field trips, they submit lists as if they were a team. And this year we're changing sort of how we do it. I think it seems only fair to allow field trips to raise funds and compete for prizes against other field trips. So this year we're going to be introducing those prize categories to the running as well. Most species seen and most funds raised by a field trip. I suppose if Ben is the only field trip, we might not do that category. But the species they see will be added to the combined grand total, but they obviously won't be eligible to compete for prizes against big day teams or backyard teams. They'll be their own category. But last year we had a handful of field trips. The Dennis Sertaheli championed an auto tour through the Lahontan Valley, and that sounded like it was a good time. And then Ben Sonnenberg led a trip at Rancho San Rafael that I heard went really well. And then Kathy Cosmary from Red Rock Audubon put together and led a trip at Floyd Lamb Park for us, which was wonderful of them. So I just think these field trips are great. An easy way in the door if you're hesitant about doing a whole big day, but you want to see what it's all about. You can come do one of these field trips and talk to your trip leader about what a big day is like, and maybe next year you'll put together your own route. So our other categories for the Birdathon, you can participate as a big day birder or as a backyard birder. For our big day birders, you're picking any 24-hour period between May 1st and May 15th to do a big day. And as with any big day planning, you're going to be picking a strategic route to tally as many species as possible. You're going to be thinking about the different habitats you can see, what time of day you want to be at the various habitats, how long it's going to take you to get from A to B, how many hours are you going to burn up driving with a chance to see more species, because you're definitely going to spend the hours, but maybe you'll see the species. So there's trade-offs. Are you really going to drive 3 hours to chase vagrants at Miller's? It's probably not worth it. But in addition to the strategery of planning your big day, you are strategizing how to raise funds. And I think it can be daunting to ask people for money, especially if you think you're just asking someone for money to go birding. So it's important to realize that this is really all for Pinyon J conservation. Well, we all love going out and doing big days and seeing as many species as we can for fun. We are doing this for a cause, and it's for the Pinyon Jays. And if you're asking people for money for a cause, I think they'll appreciate seeing that you care enough to ask. So don't be daunted to ask people for money. I think that they'll be appreciative of the cause. But that's the other strategy: fundraising and bird seeing. So there's info in the registration packet. Once you sign up as a team, there's fundraising tips and rules, and all that info is in there. It'll also be made available on our website. So as a big day birder or a backyard birder is the other way in which you can participate. And this was an adaptation to the pandemic taking off. But as we realized the pandemic taking off, backyard birding was also taking off as folks were stuck at home from quarantines or working at home or were laid off or whatever they were doing. They were staring out their windows looking at their bird feeders. So we capitalized on this movement. We came up with the backyard category. We thought it would be short-lived as a crutch to get the Birdathon through the pandemic. But we realized it's like the field trips, it's a great way to get people involved. It's a great way to encourage participation without the daunting task of planning a whole big day. So backyard birders can use the entire 2-week window to keep a yard list. And there's no it's not a cop-out. There's plenty of strategy to seeing birds in your yard. You want to make sure you've got an attractive yard with your native shrubs that are flowering at the right time, that are timed with the migrating birds, that are attracting the right insects that the birds are tuned to prey on. Is your water feature dried up? Is it frozen over? Is it dirty? Are your feeders stocked? Are you checking the yard in the middle of the night for owls? Are you getting all the birds singing in the morning? All the stuff you normally do to attract birds to your yard. You're just gonna do extra and spend extra time chasing away those wandering cats because they're out there chasing your birds away. And since I've got the photo of the peacock up there, I'll mention that one rule about countability. And again, all the rules are on our website for later reference, but you're only counting species that are countable per ABA standards. So exotics are only countable if they're well established. For example, your Eurasian collared dove or something like that. But a green canary finch or something is not going to be countable on your list. So this peacock might be fun to see, but doesn't go on your list. Let's see. Last year, I heard some fun stories from some of the teams down south I was talking to. The Beasts of Burden had an interesting start to their big day, and if I'm remembering the story correctly, and there's a good chance I'm not, they were alerted to this blood-curdling scream and turned to see a jackrabbit tumbling out of the woods down the embankment. And before they really realized what was happening, a blur of a great horned owl swept it away, and they were all just left there, stunned and scared and silent, starting their big day in the dark, cold 3 a.m. spring mountains. So I got a kick out of hearing that. I'm sure other teams had exciting stories as well. So please do share. I really want to hear how your big days go. I know that the Moonlight Drive, which was the winners in the backyard category, they added Bell's Vireo to their yard list. So I thought that was pretty exciting that the Birdathon gave them a new yard bird. Up north, I know Parker Flickinger saw 70 species, all of his own accord. That's a pretty impressive solo big day. But again, I didn't officially solicit stories and photos from teams last year, and I definitely should have. So please do send in your stories. We want to hear, and we want to tell everyone about it. So Kayla and I attempted a big day in 2020. We represented GBBO as the Iron Merlins. We were pretty excited to do our first big day, and it had been a couple of years for both of us. And we had a pretty ambitious route. It didn't start in the Carson Range. It started in Reno and went to the Carson Range and went out to the Lahontan Valley because the allure of those wetlands was just too tempting when planning the route. But in retrospect, I think we bit off more than we could chew. I think we burned up too many hours driving because those wetlands did not deliver. We started off very well in the Demone Ranch wetlands. They're very productive, IDing barn swallows by street lamp, multiple species vocalizing at 3 a.m. But we headed up to the Carson Range, and the wind foiled our owling attempts. The dawn chorus was pretty good. We had a beautiful morning at Spooner Lake, and probably caused us to spend more time there than we should have, but we just couldn't pull ourselves away. There were bald eagles and osprey overhead. There were evening grosbeaks all over the place. I mean, that wasn't even our only spot. We had evening grosbeak. And somehow we managed to bird the entire morning and almost leave the Carson Range without seeing a Clark's Nutcracker until one flew over the truck as we were driving down the highway, down Spooner Summit, down Spooner Highway, almost at tree line. But we did get our Clarks. And then we managed to drive all the way to Fallon without detecting a horned lark. But fortunately, as soon as we opened the door, we had one. So maybe a little redemption, even if our water birds didn't show up. The ducks at S-Line that were there a few days prior, someone told them we were coming to count them, and they ran off on us. So we hurried back to Reno, realizing that Fallon was a bust. We started to make up for lost species in those wetlands in southeast Reno, but we realized we were running out of daylight, so we zoomed over to the Mogul Bridge, and we got that hooded oriole that had been sticking around. We zipped back over to Rancho, finished up at 9 p.m. when it was almost too dark to ID a ringneck duck. So we were stoked. It was an awesome day, but we were definitely a little disappointed that we missed some frustrating, easy, should have been gimme species out in Fallon. But nonetheless, we had a great time zipping around and counting birds. So that's what a birdathon is. That's what we've been doing the past few years, and that's what we're looking to do this year. If you want to participate, you can register as a team. Registration is open April 1st. I think that URL is already pasted into the chat, but that's where you go to find everything Birdathon. You register as a team or an individual, and once you do so, we create a page for you on our website where you can direct people to donate to you. And that's probably the easiest way to get donations. Though in your registration packet, you will also have a pledge sheet, so you can go around and collect per species pledges. Just remember that it'll be your responsibility, your team's responsibility, to then follow up with your donors to let them know how many species you saw and how much to write the check for. And again, all the information about where to write the check and who to send it, that's gonna all be in your registration packet. So once you register as a team or an individual, you get the welcome materials. We create your web page. You then decide if you're going to do a big day or if you're going to be a backyard birder. Either way, whatever you decide, you're going to go tell everyone you know to donate all of their money to your team's effort for Pinyon J Conservation. You're going to do that by collecting pledges or directing them to the web page we create for you. And then once you've generated a whole lot of hype for your team and raised all the funds you can, you're going to go birding. You're going to see as many birds as you can. And then you report back to us by May 31st. We need all those checklists in by May 31st so that we can tally up the results, come up with a winner, determine who gets prizes in time to announce them at the upcoming awards ceremonies. So it's pretty straightforward. I think it seems like a lot at first, but then once you do it, it's just a crazy 24-hour period, and you run around like a maniac and see all the birds you can. But if you don't feel like doing that, there's other ways you can support the Birdathon. You can sponsor the Birdathon as an individual or on behalf of your business. Info about that on the website, social media, recognition, promotion, and all that good stuff. You can make general donations to the Birdathon. you can donate to specific teams. They all have their own page on, they'll all have their own page on the website. And then 10% of all of your donations are eligible to go to Audubon societies. So you can choose once you're making the donation if you want 10% to go to an Audubon society of your choice. And you can volunteer to lead a field trip, and that would be a huge help to us as well. And for any more questions or Birdathon info, that's the link right there. And I do believe it's already in the chat because Kayla's awesome. And so I mentioned this is our third year. We're still pretty new to this. We've learned a lot since 2019. We're still learning. We still expect to continue to develop upon the Birdathon. Maybe we'll come up with more prize categories. Maybe we'll do a photo contest. Maybe we'll refine the backyard category to be a full-on 24-hour big sit. A bird of the year. Maybe there'll be some community partners that want to collaborate with concrete funding goals for specific projects. But your feedback is valuable. We'd love to hear from people that have Birdathon with us before and see what they thought. So with that, I will take any questions about the Birdathon. Let's see.
I'm gonna jump back on here so I can field questions. We don't have anything coming in at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, I saw stuff in the chat, but that looks like all your
It's all
all the URLs.
I would like to add for the big day for the Birdathon, you can bird for as much or as little time as you like. So you can do a full 24 hours, or you can, you want to go out for 3 or 4 hours and have that be your Birdathon submission. You're welcome to do so.
Yeah, good point. Your Birdathon can be as much or as little as you make it. Just be aware that there's maniacs out there that are gonna go hard. All right. Well, if no one has, all right. Well, we'll go into some bird ID and bird quiz stuff. If there's any more Birdathon questions, we can circle back at the end. If my keyboard works, we will go into bird ID. Maybe the mouse works. There we go. Since the first one I'll talk about is more of an ID point, well, we can make this be the first one, get everybody feeling good. Who knows who this is?
Nothing in the chat, so I'd go ahead and reveal.
Well, spoiler, that's a great-tailed grackle, everybody. Everyone should know that already. That's an easy one. You're supposed to feel good about yourselves now. Oh, this keyboard. There we go. So the first ones I want to talk about are scrub jays. Get a lot of people talking about scrub jays and having difficulties separating these guys. And that's pretty fair. So I'll talk about, they can be kind of tricky. I think the best visual field mark is the blue collar. You can see it probably best on the lower left photo. So the 2 birds on the left are California scrub jays, and the 2 birds on the right are Woodhouse's scrub jays. And you'll notice right off the bat that the California scrub jays are much bolder, brighter blue, contrastier birds in general. But that blue neck collar, it comes down and almost meets in the middle of the chest there. Versus on those 2 Woodhouses on the right, like sometimes like that bottom bird is showing maybe a little shoulder patch, but that top bird, there's nothing there at all. And so that's probably the easiest silver bullet, if you will, visual field mark for them. But there's some other things like that back color and overall contrast. If you look at the birds on the left, it's pretty bold, rich blue to gray contrast versus the Woodhouses on the right. It's kind of a washed out blue gray on a washed out gray blue back. It's just a lower contrast overall. There's differences in the bill shape and size, and that harkens back to why they are separate species in the first place, because your California scrub jays evolved and adapted to feeding on acorns from oak trees. So they have much stouter, robust bills for chomping into acorns. And your woodhouse's scrub jays evolved and adapted with pines. So they have longer, more slender bills for dealing with pine nuts. And this separation has contributed to why they're different species in the first place. So again, related to habitat. Habitat is a good cue for these guys. But we in Reno, Northern Nevada, Eastern California, live in an area where the two species meet and introgress and freely hybridize. So there's some areas where the birds are not reliably identifiable, where they may really look like one or the other, but if you're in the Pine Nut Mountains, there's a good chance that your bird has genetics of both species. So just be mindful of that, depending on where you are. In a lot of places, this is not a relevant confusion species, but in Northwestern Nevada, Northeastern California, they overlap and are worth knowing how to separate. Another thing is the behavior. Woodhouses are much more shy, retiring bird, whereas your Californias are bolder, more approachable birds. And I have a hard time gauging this one because my experience with a lot of the California birds California scrub jays is in Reno, where they're urban, human habituated birds that are naturally going to be bolder. So I don't think it's really fair to compare those to birds in rural Nevada that are not habituated to humans. But if I spent more time in rural California and looking at rural California scrub jays, perhaps I'd have a better feel for that. So yeah, I want to talk about scrub jays for a minute. If anyone has any questions about scrub jays, otherwise I'll go into the next group.
No questions yet.
Oh, but I see Gene Tinsman nailed it in the chat.
Yeah.
Gene. All right. Don't know. There we go. The next group are the goldfinches, American and lesser goldfinch. Lesser goldfinch are year-round residents throughout the state. American goldfinches are winter visitors throughout the state, but they breed only in the most northern parts. So I think the two, so lesser goldfinches look the same year-round. Their males and females are dimorphic, but they don't molt into spring and summer or winter plumage. Americans are dimorphic and they molt into different plumages. So that bird on the left is a male American in the winter. And you'll probably mostly be confusing them with female lessers because those are the two closest together in terms of washed out yellowness in the winter. Americans have very contrasty black wings compared to their back color. These photos don't show it well, but I've got some more on the next page. These photos show the coloring of the undertail coverts really well. The American almost always has bright white, like contrasting white undertail coverts, and lessers are, that particular lessers are rather yellow. Sometimes there's just a hint of yellow, but they're never going to be that bold, contrasty like the Americans. And again, when Americans show yellow in the winter, it's pretty much only the males. The females are really brown in the winter, and the males show it on the face and the chest, and the rest of them is pretty washed out. So their black wings really stand out against their washed out brown back color. And then you've got the overall impression of the bird. Lessers are a little smaller. They perch differently. There's different structures that you get a feel for when you look at a bunch more of them. But those field marks are some of the ones that I like to look at. The contrast of the wings and the undertail coverts are really useful, I find. And so here I've got a smattering of goldfinch photos. So I'll go around in a circle. Top left, there's an American male, spring male, molting into his breeding plumage. male American goldfinches turn chartreuse highlighter bright electric yellow in the breeding season, a much different hue of yellow than the lessers turn. And so next to him, front and center, is an adult male lesser goldfinch with that black cap, and then you can see his white tail patches. The photo, the top right, is also an adult male lesser, and you can see the black coloring extending onto the back a little more. That photo is taken in the winter, and that looks like that bird is still coming into his adult plumage. There's still some yellow in his black cap, but once he's fully molted, he'll have a nice black cap, and that's a really good field mark for your male lesser goldfinch. Americans have a black patch on the black crown patch, but it's not a full black cap like that. And then in the lower right, there's a female lesser, and I actually can't tell what sex American that is, but there's two goldfinches in that picture. I'm thinking that's a female. But you can see the way they perch is different. The structure of the bird is different. Look at those really contrasty black wings on the American, which is the upper bird in the photo, compared to the lesser. It just washes into those black wings. And then those white undertail coverts are very bold on the American, compared to the undertails of the lesser that just kind of blend in with the vent and belly color. And then finally, the lower left is a female winter American goldfinch. Very brown, washed out looking bird overall, with black contrasty wings. So if there's any questions on goldfinches, I can talk about goldfinches, or I can move on to some other finches. And I don't see anything.
Yeah, no questions.
But feel free to type questions as I'm moving on. We can circle back to any and all of these. If I'm not giving you enough time to type your question into that chat box, I know it can be frantically typing and I'm moving on. So we'll come back to any questions if you type them in. The next group is house cassins and purple finches, red males, brown streaky females. And you may notice that these aren't the most well lit or best exposed photographs. And that's kind of the point. I want to emphasize the importance of bill structure with these species, because that is, again, by far and away, I mean, like I said, with the scrub jays, it's a huge driver in speciation. It really is an important part of what makes these birds actually different beings, is their bill, because it determines what foods they're eating. But so right off the bat, house finches, they really just have a small stubby bill. It's hard to get a feel for its size and perspective in that photo, but the bird appears small overall, and the bill is short and stubby relative to the rest of it. But that upper edge, the culmen, is curved, and so that contributes to the short, stubby look of the bill. And then the bill of the purple finch, much more robust than the house finch, but still curved culmen, but just a chunkier, thicker, more robust bill. And that particularly female is not showing it well, but some purple finches really have honking big chunky bills, with that curved culmen, curved upper edge. And then the Cassin's finch, that's a male on the far right there, is going to have a straight culmen, gives the bill a very long conical appearance. But those bill differences are hugely important in identifying these species. And so let's see, you've got your male and female plumages of each. The males are easy, so we'll do those first. The male house finches, they're a different color red. They're just a bright, like Crayola crayon red, versus your male purple and Cassin's finches are a rich raspberry red. And the placement of the red is also very useful. So the male house finch, the red on the chest gives way to brown streaking as you get down towards the vent, but the red on the fronts of purple and Cassin's finches never really give way to that brown streaking. They just kind of fade to like a rosy pink whitish wash. But the purple finch, the male's red is really evenly suffused throughout. And the Cassin's Finch red is really brightest on the forehead, like he got hit in the head with a cherry or something. It's just kind of only on his face. And the back is brown, the chest fades to white pretty quickly as you go down towards the belly. So the males, I think, are pretty straightforward. Not a lot of people have trouble with the males. It's the females that are a little more tricky. And the breast streaking combined with the bill shape is probably the best way to separate the females. Your female house finches have really blurry, smudgy streaking, and it almost looks like brown streaks on a lighter brown background, just very smudgy overall. Your purple finches are a bit more crisp, definitely brown streaks on a lighter colored background, but still kind of muddy and disjointed. Whereas the streaking on a female Cassin's finch is just thin and very crisp and sharp looking. So your breeding habitat is a useful as well. You know, your house finches tend to be lower down in your yards, your cottonwoods, lowland riparian, but some surprising arid desert habitat too. Purple finches are pretty much a winter bird in Nevada, but in the breeding season, our birds generally head over to California and use mixed coniferous woodlands. And Cassin's finches are typically our more montane finch up in your aspen stands and coniferous forest, sometimes in the pinyon juniper. But they do move around, and you'll get them at Miller's Rest Stop and lowland cottonwoods in the spring and fall migration when they're moving around. And vocalizations, I forgot to talk about vocalizations with goldfinches, but it's just as well because I don't have recordings here. But these guys all do have distinct vocalizations that are useful in their identification. Zeno Canto is a great resource for checking out these vocalizations. I'll spare you my impressions, as entertaining as that might be. And here are some photos of male and females of the three species. And you can see and actually the female house finch there has crisper streaking than some do. But that's a Cassin's finch female in the top center, and you can see that very crisp, dark brown on light white background streaking. The female purple finch is kind of in between the levels of streaking of the other two. And that face pattern you see on the female Cassin's and purple finch, that white eyebrow, that white malar stripe almost gives the bird a masked look. And the female house finch generally doesn't show that masked look. Hairy versus downy, just a quick one, and they're so common, I figure why not. Overall size is not a great way to separate these, as often as you'll hear birders say, that bird's too big to be a downy, or vice versa. Looking at the bill length relative to the head is probably the best for these guys. And I don't see quite as many giant downy woodpeckers out here as I did back east, but the bill length relative to the head is the best to separate these two. So that's a downy on the left and a hairy on the right. And you can see that downy's bill is less than half the width of the head, versus the hairy's bill is definitely more than half the width, almost all of the width of the head. So the bill length is really the best for those guys. They both show that white back patch, their white bellies, their dark black on the back. And those are both males with the red nape. In vocalizations, again, hairy woodpecker has a louder, more forceful peak call, and the rattle stays even. Downy has a soft, squeaky peak call, and the rattle descends. So pretty straightforward, but nonetheless, they trip a lot of people up. So if no one has questions on any of those, we'll do some quiz birds. What do we got, people?
Another second. We hear one guest come through.
Yeah, we'll give people a minute to type their guesses.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, do you want to reveal?
yeah, I'll reveal. So warbling vireo is a good guess. This is a Philadelphia vireo, and they can look remarkably similar. They can be really, really tough, but the yellow on the throat is good. Like warbling vireos can show that yellow wash underneath. We've all seen some bright warbling vireos, and certainly tried to turn our fair few into Philadelphias. But this guy has that really, really bright yellow throat, bright undertail, and if the angle were better, you'd see the crown is lower contrast. No, sorry, higher contrast than your warbling vireo. Not
We
a
would
great
certainly, we'd
not
certainly
a,
expect to see warbling vireos here.
oh yeah, warbling is expected. Philadelphia is hoped for. I don't know off the top of my head. I should, because we've got a pending record. There's only a handful of Philly vireo records in the state. They're a tough one, and mostly in the fall, not a spring vagrant. If my keyboard works, I will get us to the next one. There we go. Anybody have any guesses for this one?
Nothing yet. This is another trick.
This is a tricky one. Not an everyday bird, but they show up every year. Well, if we still don't have any guesses, so I can
Oh, we have one guess, two
get some
guesses.
guesses.
The consensus is chest-sided warbler.
That is correct. You guys nailed it. There is no other bird that is lime green like that. And pretty much all of the chestnut-sideds that show up in Nevada are lime green like that. What's going on here? All right, next bird. All right, it's not the best quality photo, but you can see what you need to see to identify it.
No guesses yet.
Well, I suppose I could spill the beans.
Yeah, you might have to.
Well, that one is a lesser goldfinch. This is a female, doesn't have that black cap, dark on the back, but not black on the back. Contrasty wings, but not very high contrast wings. Doesn't have those clean cut wing bars like an American. Doesn't have a bill like a warbler. So, you know, it's a goldfinch. Oops. Blasting through them. Here we go. All right, put some
guesses
tough
yet.
ones in here.
Yeah, you did.
This one's also a review species, only a handful of records in the state. That's a prairie warbler, another eastern warbler, but yellow all over. That face pattern is very distinct for prairie warbler, that especially the arc under the eye, that sort of upside down semicircle is a really good field mark in any plumage. Fortunately, that's a nice boldly patterned individual. And they show some rufous on the back as well. Some streaking on the flanks is a good field mark for them. But eastern warbler, okay. next up,
No guesses yet. This is also a tough one. Couple species.
nobody wants to play with me tonight. So this is a great crested flycatcher. You'd probably recognize it as a Myarchus, and if it was silent, could pass it off as an ash-throated, or probably not a brown crested. The bill would probably look too small, but oh, Jean was typing. She nailed it. These guys show like the most yellow in the belly and the most rufous in the tail of probably any of the Myarchids. That yellow is really, the upper border of that yellow is really contrasty against that gray. And the tail feathers are just really boldly rufous. So, but if it were vocalizing, which hopefully it would be, because that's the best way to identify Myarchids, it would give itself away with its distinct vreep calls. That's how I would call them. And so as I was putting it together, it made me think that maybe we should talk about Myarchids for a second. So here we go. We've got two expected species in Nevada. And in most of Nevada, only one expected species. But down south, you can get the brown crested, which is the bird on the left. And you can see its big, massive bill compared to the much smaller bill of the ash-throated on the right. Again, that bill morphology, if you take anything away from this, take away that the bill is an important field mark. If you have an unknown bird, pay attention to the bill, and that will be very useful. But also the ash-throateds are very pale overall. There's barely yellow under there, and that's variable. Sometimes they can be a bit more yellow than others, but on average, the brown crested is more boldly colored than your ash-throated. And again, vocalizations, if they're being obliging and vocalizing for you, that ought to give it away. Though they do like to mimic each other, and there is some overlapping vocalizations. But if it's early and they're doing the dawn song, that's a pretty reliable vocalization to separate, and then a few other calls. But if they're silent, the bill is the best way. So those are our two, and the rufous and the tail feathers. So for these two species, I don't put any stock in that. You'll see Sibley talk about the dark bar at the tip of one of the tails. I don't know, you have to get a really good look of the bird in really good light, and it's a waste of time. Get comfortable looking at the bill, be able to look at the bill and tell from that. It's a much more reliable field mark. Come on. So those are our two expected species. And then we have these unexpected species, like the great crested I just talked about is an eastern species, and that is the bird on the right. And then on the left, you have the dusky capped, which is south of us, mostly a Mexican species. They get into Arizona, New Mexico. Vocalizations are the best field mark for all Myarchids, I think, but fortunately, the dusky capped shows pretty much no rufous in the tail feathers. So I find that to be a fairly useful visual field mark, is the absence of rufous, because the others all have it. And then that great crested is just look at how boldly patterned that is. Much more bold than our expected Myarchids. And again, if they were vocalizing, that would be the best. So I have a few more quiz birds. How about this one? Give a longer pause and make sure everybody gets a chance.
Yeah, I think there might be a slight lag in the chat, so apologies if we've sped through. I'm not giving you time to guess. Okay, we have a guess in from Jean.
And she's right. It's a red-eyed vireo. So that's a good angle to see some head contrast. Again, not one of the species I was talking about before, but in some looks, from some angles, they can look similar to a warbling or filly vireo. But they're generally not as yellow below, except their back generally is much more olive than the other two that are more gray on the back. The head, very, very bold, contrasty, and the eye is actually red, but you can't really see it well in most lighting. So that's a red-eyed vireo.
Okay, we have one guess in so far. Give everyone another second.
So that one guess that
Yeah.
has come in is correct. This is an American redstart. That is a female, and they show up all the time. Not all the time. They're not an everyday bird, but they show up every year in Nevada.
All right, no guesses for this one yet.
I'll give it another couple seconds.
All right, we have a couple guesses in the chat now if you want to take a look.
That we do. So Jean is correct. That is a LeConte sparrow, but Henslow's was a good guess. That bold dark line behind the eye, a little bolder maybe in LeConte's. The back pattern is going to be useful for these two because they both show some streaking on the breast, maybe not as much on a LeConte's as on a Henslow's. The bill too, Henslow's has a much heavier bill. This is a thinner billed bird, but on the right track. Little Ammodramus type sparrow, which actually I think they've revised the taxonomy, and I'm not sure these are even Ammodramus anymore. At one point they were. But yes, this is a LeConte's. So good guess, Brian. And you would have been looking at the field guide, and you would have seen that the bill on this bird is just not right for Henslow's. Again, the bill is the best, except for on immature hairy woodpeckers. All right, this is our last quiz bird. And Brian's got it. That is a California scrub jay. Bold blue collar, bold blue contrast against that back patch. Well, that is all I have for you guys tonight. If there are any questions about Birdathons, big days, any of the species we talked about, I'm happy to direct them to Jean.
I would like to add that the registration for the Birdathon opens on April 1st. So if you have a team or if you want to register as a solo birder, backyard birder, big day birder, registration is April 1st, and you can visit our website, which is posted in the chat.
All right. Well, thanks, Kayla, and thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you all, and I hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.